Now verse 16 moves from Jehoiada's death, aged 30, to his very honourable burial. And they buried him in the city of David, Jerusalem, among the kings, because he had done good in Israel, both toward God and toward his house. This makes him the only high priest ever to have been buried among the kings. Zadok and Abiathar, the high priests in the days of David, they didn't receive this honor. Hilkiah, the high priest in Josiah's reign, who uncovered the book of the law in the temple, didn't receive this dignity. And widening it out, Jehoiada receives the most honourable burial, so far as we know, of any high priest. The only possible exception is Aaron, who died in Mount Hor, and for whom Israel mourned 30 days, according to Numbers chapter 20. Israel's second high priest after Aaron, Eleazar, his burial is recorded in the last verse of the book of Joshua. But normally, the burial of the high priest isn't even mentioned in the Bible. But here we have Jehoiada. And Jehoiada was buried in Jerusalem among the kings, among David, Solomon, and all the rest. Because he had done good in Israel, both toward God and toward his house. He spent the whole of his long 130 years in the service of Christ's church, in offering sacrifices when he was later installed, and prayer, in teaching and leading the people. He worshipped the Lord and obeyed his word. He renewed the covenant between God and Israel. He helped repair the temple, and then he restored proper temple worship. This is a man worthy of an honourable burial in the church. And his burial was so honourable that he was buried among kings. The reason for this is that he alone, of all the high priests, was buried among the kings because he was the closest to the Davidic throne of any high priest in Israel. He lived during the reigns of 8 kings in Jerusalem. He served as high priest during the reigns of probably 5 of those 8. Joash here, Joash's father Ahaziah, his father Jehoram, then Jehoshaphat, the ecumenical king, and probably part, if not all, of Asa, who reigned for 41 years. He was also the high priest in the darkest days so far for the house of David, the days of Athaliah, the only non-Davidite to rule in Judah. There was Jehoiada, instrumental in saving the last surviving member of the line of David among the men. 6 years later, he restored the lawful king to the throne. More than that, Jehoiada even married into the royal house of David. His wife was the daughter of King Jehoram. His wife was the sister of King Ahaziah. His wife was the aunt of King Joash. And he, Jehoiada, was the foster father of King Joash, as well as the king's teacher and chief advisor for many years. No wonder they buried him among the kings. The closest any high priest ever came to the house of David. And that verse 16 says they buried him among the kings because he had done good in Israel. And in our culture, when we make up the headstone at the graveyard, in our culture we may well have had the sculptor chisel that onto the stone. Here lies Jehoiada. He did good in Israel. That would be a nice thing for people to say of us when we pass. Now, I've explained verses 15 and 16 right at the start of this sermon and before dealing with Joash's apostasy for the same reasons as the inspired penman of 2 Chronicles. Now alone are we in a position to see why Joash listened to Jehoiada and why Joash outwardly stayed on track as long as Jehoiada lived. This Jehoiada was a man of gigantic stature. Joash, young as he was, yielded to Jehoiada's age. Here's this venerable old man with a hoary head who's 100 years or so older than me. He submitted to Jehoiada's office because he is high priest, the greatest high priest during all the days of the kingdom of Judah, even greater than Hilkiah, high priest in Josiah's day. And amongst all of Aaron's sons, Jehoiada is right up there with Eleazar and Phinehas, who cropped up in the last series of sermons in Judges chapter 20, and Zadok and Joshua the son of Josedek, who was instrumental in the days after Judah returned from the captivity. Hoary with age, the great high priest. And as far as Joash was concerned, Jehoiada was his uncle, because he married his aunt. He was his foster father. He was his chief teacher from early age and his number one advisor. And no one came close, anywhere near to, the influence that Jehoiada had had on Joash's life. Because on top of all of that, Jehoiada had saved Joash from certain death when he was a baby. Jehoiada had sheltered him for 6 years. And it was to Jehoiada that he owed his restoration to the throne. And where would Joash have been without the great high priest? But then came Jehoiada's death and burial. And despite the tremendous external influence and pressure of Jehoiada, the love of God was not in Joash's heart. The king had no real living faith. The word of God did not grip and control him. And it only took the right circumstances for his true nature to be revealed. Now Jehoiada is dead and buried. Joash is free. Free for the first time in his life to do what he wants. He's free from the direction and guidance and rebuke and the fear of admonition from Judah's greatest living statesman. Because that's what Jehoiada was in his days. Now he was free to do what he really wanted. That is, he was free to sin more freely. He was free to be a slave of sin and Satan. That was the freedom he had. Bondage. With the death of Jehoiada, there's a power vacuum. Who is going to be the king's new advisor?